Let's start with the heists that were almost perfect and slowly work our way towards the ones that made some thieves multi-millionaires. Number 7. The Great Brinks Robbery. On January 17, 1950, in Boston, Massachusetts, 11 men entered the Brinks Armored Car Depot, all wearing chauffeur caps, pea coats, rubber Halloween masks, and each carrying a .38 caliber revolver. The 5 workers on shift that day were quickly tied up and their mouths were taped shut. The thieves were in and out within 20 minutes, stealing over $2.7 million in cash and valuables, a value that would be worth around $36 million today. No one was injured and not a single piece of useful evidence was left behind. Even the escape vehicle that was used for the robbery was later found cut to pieces at the local dump. All in all, it was the perfect heist. It would even be labeled by the media as the crime of the century. The case would have gone cold if it weren't for the greed of 2 of the thieves. You see, later that year, 2 of the thieves were captured in another bank robbery, Joseph O'Keefe and Stanley Guscara. Both men were looking at many years behind bars, so they began to beg their previous partners for money to help pay for their lawyer fees. But they were rejected and were sentenced to jail. After serving his time, O'Keefe was released, only to be arrested once again. And just like before, he requested money from his previous partners, this time claiming that he didn't get his fair share in the Brinks robbery. But again, he was rejected. So O'Keefe threatened to testify against his previous partners unless he got some money. Soon after his threats, O'Keefe was shot multiple times by a hired hitman, but barely survived. While recovering in the hospital, FBI agents approached him, making a deal to testify against the men that tried to kill him. O'Keefe testified in court, explaining in great detail on how they managed to pull off the Brinks robbery, and all of his previous partners were sentenced to life in prison. Now, the crazy part is that if this trial had taken place just 5 days later, it would have reached the statute of limitations, and all the men would have gotten away with the perfect heist. Number 6. The Lufthansa Heist. One of the largest heists and perhaps the bloodiest in history was the Lufthansa Heist. In the middle of the night on December 11, 1978, 6 men broke into the Lufthansa's airline cargo terminal at New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. The men quickly made their way to the airline's vault, stealing $5.8 million in cash and $800,000 worth of jewels, a value that would be worth around $32 million today. No bullets were fired, nobody was injured, and the heist only took an hour to complete. On that night, those 6 men managed to pull off the largest heist in American history. None of the men involved would ever be caught for this robbery. But just because the men were never caught doesn't mean that they lived long enough to enjoy the money. You see, authorities began to connect the 6 men to the Lucchese crime family, one of the 5 notorious Italian-American mafia crime families that ruled New York during this time period. But as authorities began to pinpoint exactly who was involved in the robbery, one by one, the men in question began to show up dead. Over a dozen bodies and numerous disappearances made convicting anyone impossible. Many men were found shot to death. A man was found hogtied and frozen to death inside of a meat refrigeration truck. Then a few days later, a woman's torso washed ashore in New Jersey, and so on and so on. In the end, none of the money was ever recovered, and with so many people murdered, no one really knows who ended up with the money. But whoever did would be set for life. Number 5. D.B. Cooper. On November 24th, 1971, a man named D.B. Cooper purchased an airline ticket that would take him from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. He was one of 36 passengers on that flight. As soon as the plane took off, Cooper ordered a bourbon and soda, and after consuming his drink, he handed the flight attendant a handwritten letter, instructing her to sit next to him. When she did, he opened up his suitcase and showed her a bomb. He instructed her to tell the captain that he would need 4 parachutes and $200,000 once the plane landed in Seattle, which she quickly did. When the flight finally landed, the FBI made sure to give Cooper exactly what he had asked for, but in exchange for all of the passengers on board, which he agreed to. Cooper would only keep 4 crew members on board as hostages, locking them all inside the cockpit. He instructed the captain that their next destination was Mexico City, to which he complied. But here's where things get even more interesting. Cooper instructed the captain to fly at an elevation of 10,000 feet. And just 20 minutes into the flight, the captain was alerted that the back of the plane's stairs had been lowered. Suspecting that Cooper might have jumped, he landed the plane in Nevada. On arrival, the FBI quickly searched the plane. But of course, Cooper was not inside. He had jumped from the plane into the forest in the middle of the night with $200,000, somewhere between Seattle and Reno. Over 200 US military officials, including the Army and Air Force, conducted one of the largest land sweeps ever done, but nothing was found. That night of the flight would be the last time anyone ever saw the man with the name of D.B. Cooper. Number 4. The Great Train Robbery. On August 8, 1963, a gang of 15 robbers intercepted a Royal Mail train in Buckinghamshire, England. The robbers had stuffed a glove over the green railroad light and powered the red light using a portable battery, causing the driver of the train to come to a complete stop. As the driver went to investigate why the train was signaled to stop, he was quickly attacked and hit over the head with the metal pipe, then handcuffed and thrown to the side of the tracks. The robbers would escape with £2.6 million, a value that would be around £46 million today, or approximately $60 million. After the robbery, all 15 men and 2 key informants met at a farmhouse. There, they evenly split the money and fled. The farmhouse was then set ablaze by 6 men who were paid to destroy all of the evidence. But unfortunately for the thieves, the 6 men did such a terrible job that the police were able to acquire all of the burglars' fingerprints, which they found on a Monopoly board. Thanks to the board game, 15 of the 17 members would get arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. Only one of the members was acquitted, as there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him. Meanwhile, the other member, who was believed to have had inside information on the train and the valuables it was carrying, was never caught or identified. And to this day, this man remains a complete mystery. He is only known by his alias, the Ulsterman. Nothing else is known about him. Number 3. The British Bank of the Middle East Heist. Now, there is no other heist surrounded in more mystery than the British Bank of the Middle East Heist. On January 20th, 1976, an unknown amount of thieves broke into the British Bank of the Middle East in Beirut during a civil war. The heist began when the thieves broke into the neighboring Catholic church, as it shared a wall with the bank. They then set off explosives on the connecting wall, gaining access to the bank. Once inside, the group's locksmith quickly got to work on the vault's locks, and within a few hours, the thieves acquired anywhere from $20 to $50 million worth of gold bars, cash, and jewels, an estimated value of around $110 to $280 million today. With no leads or suspects to go off of, an investigation never really began. This was a flawless heist done at the perfect time. Of course, without knowing how many thieves there were, I can't calculate how much money they each would have gotten, but it's safe to assume that each member made it out a multi-millionaire. Number 2. The Antwerp Diamond Heist. On February 15, 2003, one of the most elaborate heists in history took place. It would even be known as the heist of the century. The Antwerp Diamond Heist was planned by a mastermind named Leonardo Notarbartolo. But for anyone who worked at the Antwerp Diamond Center in Belgium, Leonardo was just another diamond merchant who worked in the building, as he had worked there for over 3 years. You see, this was all part of the plan. Merchants received full access to the building, including the vault, where all the lockboxes were located. And shortly after he was hired, Leonardo began to carry a small pen in his shirt pocket, which he had installed with a small camera. With the footage he acquired, Leonardo and his team created a replica of the vault where they practiced breaking into it for months. The crew consisted of 5 men: Leonardo, Speedy, Monster, the Genius, and the King of Keys, each equipped with a special set of skills to aid in the heist. And on February 15, 2003, it was all or nothing. In the dead of night, the gang would make their way to the vault, quickly dialing in the combination, which they easily acquired thanks to a small hidden camera they had installed in the room a few days prior. They then turned the lights off, opened the vault door, and quickly sprayed the heat sensor with hairspray and covered it with styrofoam. Then they covered the light sensors with black bags to avoid triggering the alarms. The second gate was quickly lockpicked by the King of Keys, and once that was opened, Monster carefully got to work on the alarm wires, disabling them. And in the complete darkness, the gang broke open all the lockboxes with a custom-made gadget the King of Keys had created, which just worked like a large corkscrew. A few hours later, with over $100 million worth of diamonds, jewels, and cash, the thieves escaped, not leaving a single piece of evidence at the crime scene. All in all, it was the perfect heist. It wasn't until their escape out of the country that one of their members' paranoia would get the best of him. Speedy began to dump all the evidence linking them to the crime in a forest, instead of burning it as they had planned. This critical error came back to haunt them, as it was later discovered by the landowner. The junk contained envelopes to the Antwerp Diamond Center, surveillance tape footage, and receipts that linked the men to the crime. The men were quickly arrested, and Leonardo, the mastermind behind the heist, was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while 3 of the members were sentenced to 5. Only one man was so meticulous as to not leave any traces of his existence before, during, and after the heist, escaping with his fair share of the loot. He walked away with $20 million worth of valuables, or a value of around $34 million today. He has been described as an elderly man, but is only known to the world as the King of Keys. And based on his work, is considered by many experts to be one of, if not the most talented key forger on the planet. Number 1. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum Heist. The largest successful heist in history might not be what you expect. On March 18, 1990, in Boston, Massachusetts, around 12:30 a.m., 2 police officers arrived at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum to investigate a disturbance. Once inside the museum, one of the officers realized that the man working security behind the desk looked very suspicious, so he quickly asked for his ID. As the man slowly got up from the desk and approached the 2 officers, he realized that one of the officers' mustaches looked to have been glued on, but it was too late. He was quickly pinned against the wall and handcuffed. As the second security guard arrived, he was immediately handcuffed as well. Both men were then taken to the basement and cuffed to a steam pipe. They then had their arms, legs, and eyes tightly duct taped. You see, the emergency button to signal the police was located on the security desk, and the moment the worker got up to show his ID, he had left it unattended. For the next hour, the 2 thieves disguised as police officers would easily acquire 13 pieces of art, valued at around $200 million, or around $500 million in today's money. And with minimal adversity, the 2 thieves had pulled off the largest and most lucrative heist of all time. Not a single piece of useful evidence was left behind, and to this day, no one really knows what happened to those valuable pieces of art, but were more than likely sold on the black market. The 2 thieves responsible for the heist were never caught, and the only thing the FBI would ever put forward is this terrible sketch of the thieves. No arrests related to the case have ever been made. You see, the thieves knew that banks and diamond centers were carefully guarded with many security measures in place, but no one ever considered more than a single button to guard millions of dollars hanging on a wall. And with that critical flaw, the 2 thieves who entered as police officers truly got away with the perfect and most lucrative heist in all of history.